they need to go to prison forever. And you will not get any lawyer who's gone down to Guantanamo to tell you, let all these people go. What they will tell you is, use the system of justice we have, use the idea of checks and balances, use the idea of courts, charge them with the crime, and that the evidence be heard. It ends up making you stronger, and you end up finding the people who are doing something bad. Got a question here in the back?
What was the ruling on the Padilla case? Apparently there was a negative ruling from the Court of Appeals a month ago.
No, it's interesting. The Court of Appeals essentially eventually said, what happened is the government said, he's an enemy combatant, we want to hold him in this military system, we're not going to charge him with a crime. And what eventually happened is the decision came up to, it was working its way up towards the Supreme Court, and basically just before, I believe it was just before decision was going to come down, the government said, no, we changed our mind. We're going to charge him in criminal courts. Now, there are two things going on. One is there was a Bush appointee, I believe it was a Bush appointee, who was essentially monitoring decisions, very conservative, very pro-law and order, very anti-terrorist, and he blew his top. He said, it is so cynical of the government to game the system this way. He was really disgusted. The other thing that was interesting, and this has happened in many number of cases, is, as you recall, initially Padilla was charged with basically being, one of the worst people alive. In the end, the charges against him, I don't recall what they were specifically, but they were very limited. They were essentially like sort of, giving aid or conspiring. So no, the decision there was really taken out of the court's hands by the Bush administration at the last minute, saying, no, we're going to charge him in criminal court anyway. And this is after holding him for years. The other issues were whether or not he was competent to stand trial. Essentially, there were claims that he had been tortured, there had been sensory deprivation, that he'd really been tortured beyond the ability where he was competent to represent himself. And I believe the decision you may be referring to is that I think eventually a judge did say, no, it appears that he is competent. What's problematic there is, you saw these cases where, like when somebody went to the dentist, they cover him up in a hood and they put earphones on him. Anytime you move them, you just basically deprive them of any sensory inputs. We know that drives people crazy. So the question of his competency is open, but I believe the decision the judge says that he was. So that may be the one you're referring to.
I was confused. What I was really thinking about was the case of the German Muslim guy who they dropped off in the field.
Oh, right.
There was some kind of case in the Fourth Circuit for him, wasn't there?
Right, there were. This is the individual, again, very problematic. There was an individual in Canada who was in the same situation. There, the Canadian government did the right thing and apologized, and I believe paid him money. A German citizen, having domestic troubles, decides he wants to leave. He runs away from home. He's going to a vacation in Macedonia, I think it was. His name is either similar, he looks like. He gets kidnapped. He's tortured. And then they realize, oops, it's the wrong guy. But this is after, it's documented. He was tortured.